Let's take a look at the Japanese particle no. Luckily, this is a pretty easy one. People don't have too much trouble with this normally. No is a particle that's used to show possession. And actually what ends up being the case is the most difficult part about the particle no is that the English equivalent is very difficult. In English, we have all of these different words that are kind of unique that show the possessive version of a word. For example, I goes to my. My is the possessive version of I, just like he goes to his. His is the possessive version of he. In Japanese, it's actually much easier than that, luckily. And in Japanese, all we have to do is put the particle no after that word to make it into the possessive version. So what that'll mean is we'll have owner, particle, the particle no, and then the thing that's being owned. As an example, we have watashi no neko. Watashi no means my, the possessive version of I, and neko, of course, cat. So watashi no neko is my cat. This goes one step further and also works for names. In names and the possessive version of that in English, we do this very weird apostrophe S thing to make it possessive. No idea why we do that in English. It's a little bit strange, but in Japanese, once again, very, very easy. We just throw the particle no after it. Obama no pen is Obama's pen. Nice and easy. There are a few things that we can do that are a little bit more advanced with the particle no. For example, if we're connecting two nouns with no, here we have Nihon no gakusei, and there's a few different ways you can think about this. If you want to think about the more direct translation, using the way that we've learned no, is you could think of it as Japan's students and think of it as the possessive version. If you would like, you can kind of think of it as of instead and say the students of Japan. Gets us a little bit closer to the natural translation. But really what this is when we have two nouns in this way, it's one noun modifying another noun. It's giving us more information about this second noun. We are talking about students, but what students are we talking about? We're talking about Japanese students is going to be our natural translation for this. Japanese students. And that's another thing that can be done with no. Again, if you wanted to think of it the same way as just being possessive, that would probably be fine in most cases, but sometimes you'll have to kind of mix up your wording a little bit in order to get the most natural answer. One last thing to point out is that the no particle does sometimes have these very long chains of no. So in this sentence, we have watashi no nihongo no sensei no pen. Very, very long. It can be a little bit confusing to follow all of that, but it does help sometimes to start on the far right side, because at the end of the day, the thing that we're talking about is in fact a pen. When we look at the English translation, we have my Japanese teacher's pen. And again, in the English version as well, the thing that we're talking about is a pen. But what kind of pen are we talking about? We're talking about sensei no pen, the teacher's pen. And as we go farther to the left, we get even more information. What teacher? Nihongo no sensei. Oh, the Japanese teacher. But what Japanese teacher? Watashi no Nihongo no sensei. My Japanese teacher. So the farther we go to the left, the more detailed information we get about this pen. And that sometimes happens with no as well. Again, that is a pretty easy one. People don't have too much trouble with that. But of course, as always, it's good to try out these practice questions just to make sure that you're solidifying that knowledge.